This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNRadio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hey, it's Spoonie. Thank you for checking out the podcast, where we have for you plenty on our take on Kevin Durant's comments to the media and the way they were interpreted. Doug Baldwin apologizes, but did he do it the right way? Love it or shove it with Bubba, and don't miss great perspective from Bomani Jones.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
So glad you chose to join us this morning. Hope most of you had a nice 3-day weekend.
Yes.
We were here yesterday, but perhaps you were out of your regular routine.
I enjoy being here. Comte gone.
We had the Comte gone, and we had the wives here yesterday.
We did. Yes, we did.
Our better halves were here yesterday, and we recorded a podcast for our 15th anniversary. That's sneaking up on us. It's interesting because our 15th anniversary has already come and gone, but the celebration of it is coming up in just a couple of weeks, and there's this page there's a whole Mike and Mike 15th anniversary
It's a great page, by the way, for those that have been with the show a while to relive some of the moments, and those maybe haven't been with the show a while. You could see some of the things that we've done years ago. It's really, really been well done.
And one of the things that's up there is I probably recorded a podcast with our wives yesterday that we meant to do 20 minutes. We wound up doing almost an hour.
Well, I was going to say we put the number at about 20 to 30 minutes. 52 minutes later, we basically had to stop because SVP and Russillo, I don't think SVP was there, Russillo.
But we were in their studio.
We were in their studio, had to get in the studio and get ready for a show. We could have gone for hours on that one.
I was having a great time.
It
Bubba
was.
gets in my ear. We need to wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. And the interesting thing about it, though, is as you look over that, people ask all the time about the show and how long we've been together. And the way I would describe it is like this. Whatever it is that the show has become and however it is that it's grown, you know how when you see your own kids every single day, you don't notice
the
that they
growth.
grow every
Right.
day.
Right.
But then when you see someone whose kids you haven't seen in 3 years,
Right.
you think, oh, my God, where did the time go?
Mm-hmm.
And so looking over that page, there is to me, it feels in some ways, I remember some of the things we did our first year as though they were yesterday.
That's exactly right. Until you look at that page.
You and me
see.
walking around Shula's restaurant in Chicago
Yeah.
from table to table asking people if they knew who we were, essentially.
People basically giving us their orders thinking we were waiters.
I got one guy ketchup, and that doesn't feel like all that long ago to me. But then I look back at the pictures and I realize, oh my God, look how long we've been at this.
And you know what? At one point we looked young and like way better than we do now.
No, that's actually not true. I actually think we look better now. You were, let's just say it, you were fat.
I was fat.
You look good. And I look great. So, I mean, I think right now the two of us look good. I think I do. I think I look better now than I did then, and I think you look much better now than you did then.
Wow, okay, I like the positive attitude.
So I think all things considered, we're doing all right. That's up there if you're interested in seeing it, and it's all a lot of fun. Let's begin with the extraordinary sensitivity of the members of the sports media.
Mm-hmm.
I am flabbergasted by this, the reaction to the Kevin Durant story, as I was to the reaction to the Marshawn Lynch story. I've been a member of the sports media, a card-carrying member, although I don't have a card, for 25 years now. And we cover sports, guys, okay? We aren't covering the wars in the Middle East.
Right.
We aren't covering politics. We're covering games being played by people, in at least my case, 25 years younger than I am. And every time they say anything that seems even remotely insulting to us, it is astonishing to me the way the media, a lot of the media anyway, sort of mobilizes in this horrified, how in the world can this happen? How can Kevin Durant not love talking to us every single second of the day? How can a young man have a bad day or a bad moment and say something that we find offensive? Have you looked at the back page of the newspapers of most of the tabloids in this country every single day? And the way they depict the figures in sports? Do you think the people in sports should love us? They should be thinking, boy, these media folks, they're just terrific. I love dealing with these guys. This is my favorite part of my job. I do it before the game. I do it after the game. I probably talk to them 200. A guy like Kevin Durant probably talks to the press 200 times in a year. Mm-hmm. So one time someone asks him a question about his long-time embattled coach. He gets angry about it, snaps back, and the entire world acts as though he has committed an act of treason. I am absolutely stunned at the reaction to this. The sports media is still living in a culture where they think that these guys need us. because that was true at one time.
Right.
But it no longer is the case. In my opinion, Kevin Durant has every right to feel however he feels. I'm not personally offended by it, and everyone should just get on with their day. And I am stunned at the reaction that I saw to this all across the place yesterday.
I definitely am as well. A lot of sensitive people out there. I guess in going forward, well, first, from my side of it, you come from the journalistic side, I come from the athletic side of in the locker room. My thought process, and now again, I was done playing in 1994, so the thought process, and listen, not talking to media or saying bad things or flipping out on the media isn't a this generation thing, okay? That's been going on a long time, all right? Mm-hmm. From when these guys played to when I played and well before me. But, my thought had always been about media is, yes, I have an obligation to talk to the media, and embrace is the wrong word, but I wasn't going to hide from it. I wasn't going to try and not be accessible. Now, again, I wasn't one of the superstars that got talked to as much as Kevin Durant did, but I was a guy that people came to in the locker room because I would give a quote.
Can I also just interject? And I'm now supposing I'm going to make this is what I think. Mm-hmm. I think you were also using it on some level for your own benefit, which is to say, I think you envisioned you were doing media
never
segment.
Did.
You never envisioned you would have a job in this.
And so I'll counter that. Never, not once.
I was guessing.
Not once did I use it. I only toward the end of my career did I think this might happen. Not in the first 8 years of it, 7 years of it.
So I apologize. Maybe not in your case, but there are plenty of players who do.
No, and that's what I'm getting to. That's what I'm getting to. So, I felt it was an obligation, and we had guys in the locker room. I can't think of too many guys. We certainly had our guys that gave the media the business, for lack of a better term, in the locker room. But I understood the responsibility. I mean, because we're throwing out the term from the Marshawn Lynch, he shouldn't have to talk. Nobody should have to talk. It's easy to say. It's an easy thing to say that he shouldn't have to talk. But then, as I said, what if Tom Brady doesn't want to talk at the Super Bowl? You know what? Should we just – I guess my thought is, Greeny, does there need to be a change in the relationship with the athlete and the media? Because you can't just blanketly say if they don't want to talk, they don't have to talk. Because go to the other side of that. Run a business that also relies some on marketing of players. Now, it's changed. The teams used to push the players out there to get the notoriety and the publicity. Now their job is to protect them a lot of times from it as well. But, when you would like your business, the business is the NFL, the business is sports, you would like your players to promote the sport and talk about the games and be accessible and have, a good relationship and keep that going. You don't want it to be adversarial. So I guess we're at a point now because of the Marshawn Lynch. This Kevin Durant thing, I think, got blown way out of proportion. But it leads to a question because of social media, because of all the ways that players can get somewhat ripped nowadays from anybody who wants to write a blog and post it. There are so many ways now compared to back not even that many years ago of ways things can get out there. Should there be a different relationship? Should the rules change from accessibility? I don't know how you can do that. I still think, I think players should be accessible. Now that accessible and giving the answers you want are two different things. I didn't care if Marshawn Lynch, that's the way he wants to go about his business, so be it. That's when I, again, turn to the media side of it, like you were saying they're too sensitive. I say in that situation, it's ridiculous to even walk up to the guy and ask him a question. If he tells you what the answer is going to be anyway, and he gives you one line, you're just bringing that on yourself. To me, you may not like the player for doing that, but I think the journalists and the reporters going up there and continuing to ask him stuff was ridiculous. But I guess the question going forward and the question out there to me would be, does it need to change? Does the relationship between media and player that we've known for decades, does it need to change because of the social media state we're in now?
We're having two different conversations. Mike and what everybody's talking about is brought to you by Myrtle Beach Golf Holidays. Start planning your getaway to Golftown, USA. Visit online at myrtlebeachgolfholiday.com. There's the conversation about access. And then there's the conversation about what Kevin Durant said. Kevin Durant didn't
That's ridiculous. I'm trying to almost. I mean, I know we're going to.
But that's what everyone was reacting to yesterday. Yesterday wasn't about Marshawn Lynch. Yesterday wasn't about whether players should be obligated to talk to the media.
I guess what I'm trying to do.
When you ask me, should the relationship between the media and the athletes change, I would say the biggest problem right now, if you're looking at the directions in which it's going, is from the media to the player, not from the player to the media.
I agree. And while we're going to hear people talking about this, I'm willing to go to the bigger picture here because I think it's ridiculous. The sensitivity on Kevin Durant, on what he said, and the reporters being sensitive about it, to me is a joke. So that's why I'm trying to spin this to a bigger picture thing, and how should the relationship change if it changes at all? And from the if you say it's from the reporter to the athlete side, how should that change?
I don't think it. How should it change? I don't know how it. I don't think it's going to change. The relationship is by definition adversarial. The relationship between journalists and the people journalists cover, and now let's face it, I'm not sure what percentage of the people out there covering this stuff are actually journalists, okay? Or the journalists in the way that we would have once described journalists or journalism. Look at the back page of the newspaper. Is that journalism? So I don't know that that's exactly how I would define a journalist. The relationship between journalists and, let's just say, real newsmakers have never been favorable. They're not buddy-buddy. That's not what it's supposed to be. Now, you go back to the 50s.
I was going to say,
the people covering the president and the president were never friends. Teddy Roosevelt was always talking about.
All I've heard back in the day, though, was the beat writers, when they'd be on the road,
that's my point.
Be hanging out
so
with the
that's
with
what
the
I'm trying
players.
to say. In sports, there was a different culture.
Right, okay.
Because sports writers would hang out with Mickey Mantle and all those guys. But you know what they did? They didn't talk about the stuff they saw. They wouldn't write about Mickey Mantle out at bars until 4 in the morning and other women and all that kind of stuff. And I don't mean to just single out Mickey, but that was fairly well known. But you know what I'm talking about. They were like hanging around. Is that the case anymore? Or has that become that now? But in the TMZ world in which we live, and listen, my job, I went to the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University. It's one of the proudest accomplishments of my life. At one point, my job was to follow Michael Jordan everywhere he went and report on where he was eating dinner. That's what I was doing for a living. I didn't feel real good about it, but that's what my boss told me to do, so that's what I did. But so should he then turn around and say, you know something? I really believe this young man needs the access. Mike, I had the lobster thermidor tonight. It was delicious. I mean, what are we doing here? What are we talking about? This is a naturally adversarial relationship. The role of the media in this case is to discover information. What's the really interesting part? Some people are writing stories based upon the things that the athletes say, but most of them are not. Most are digging into stuff that the teams don't want out there and the players don't want out there. They're trying to get the players to say something they will regret, and they will blow it completely up and out. And then they're going to rip Derek Jeter because Derek Jeter doesn't want anything to do with it. He never says anything interesting. Right. So you can't win for losing. Everything Kevin Durant said is true. You guys don't really know blank. Well, you know what? Most of us don't. Most of us covering this stuff don't really know what's going on inside. Now, you're not telling us, right? So it's our job to try and figure it out as best we can.
So it's not your fault. Is it the reporter's fault to try and give an opinion to what they think is going on?
Everyone's got their role in the game, but we're not friends. So, I mean, you can have a friendly relationship. I'm sure it's nice to have a friendly relationship, but the reality is the people involved in the business and the people covering the business, by definition, have an adversarial relationship.
And I think, like anything else, I think some of the, use the term beat reporters, I don't think they would. I think some still maybe adhere to the fact that they wouldn't report on what they saw.
But that's not who he's talking about.
No. I understand that. What I'm saying is there are more reporters and more social streams in the pot now. And so now when a ball player is looking at the media, he may see some of the beat guys that, I guess for lack of a better term, you can say you trust, as opposed to, listen, we had a beat writer in our Philadelphia Eagles locker room that basically walked around and listened to conversations amongst players and put it in a book. I mean, you want to talk about the ultimate of distrust. Of a guy just walking around and not talking but just listening. So I get it. I do get it, because there are the beat writers that do want to talk actual basketball or football or baseball or hockey, and those that want to find out, want to dig a little deeper into the story that a team doesn't want out there. But should they have the right to put that out there? Do people want to read that? Listen, I read all the trash magazines, and I love them. I'm going on a plane today. I'm heading out to Arizona. You know what that means? A longer plane ride, more trash to read. I'm going to buy. You see me? I got 5 of these magazines, and I read that stuff, and I chuckle at it. Okay, I read it. Do I take it seriously? No, but I enjoy it. Do you enjoy it out there? You know, as a sports fan when it's about an athlete. Do you want to know where he's having dinner? Do you want to know who he's dating? Do you want to know where he was at 3 in the morning? I would imagine, like anything else, some people do and some people don't care.
Here's the thing. Those magazines, which you read all the time, and I'll admit I sometimes get a kick out of, there'll be one headline that catches my attention.
Let me see
and I'm always like, oh, let me see that one. Hold on, let me see that one. But whatever it is, right, the one that I always think is hilarious, they always have a picture on the front of a woman standing on a beach from behind. All you see is her butt, and it doesn't look good, right? They find the most unflattering butt photo they possibly can, and the headline is, turn to page 34 to see whose butt this is. and then, you know, should the person whose butt that is be then sitting down with that reporter and saying, you know, let's have a conversation about the craft of my acting. I'm just making this up. It's an actress. It's
I'm with you.
Jennifer Aniston. I don't even. I'm sure her butt looks great.
I don't think we'd be saying anything.
You know
about
what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Some woman whose butt doesn't look the way you'd think her butt looks.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, should she then sit down with a reporter and say, you know, let's have a deep conversation about the craft? You know, when I was in that moment when I was making, I don't know, the name of movie she was in, when Ross and I were kissing on Friends. Circa 1997.
In the movie Cake. I mean, that's a very deep
Cake.
movie.
When I was eating cake with whatever, I didn't see the movie Cake. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking
about, is what I'm saying. So Kevin Durant has a bad day. He gets asked that question for the 6,000th time. He's having a bad year. His team is not playing well. He's losing. He's in New York, so everyone is asking him, are you going to wind up in New York a year from now? Are you going to wind up in New York? Which, by the way, I think he is, but that's neither here nor there. And then he snaps. Now, I'll give you an example. Now, this is way, way, way different from something else, okay? But I had sort of a bad day about a week ago. Whatever. I was having it's not worth getting into the details of what was going on, but sort of something kind of lousy was going on. And I got into an elevator in a hotel, and a guy recognized me. Now, I get recognized probably, what percentage of the time that Kevin Durant gets recognized, would you say, roughly? One for every 1,000 times, one for every 1,000,000 times, whatever it is. But it happens, obviously.
Right,
We've been on TV a long time. So the guy recognizes me, and I was in a bad mood, and I was not friendly. I wasn't nasty, but I was not friendly. He was just like, aren't you the guy? I was like, yeah. You know, and I was just, and he got out of the elevator, and I kept riding up, and I thought to myself, that guy is going to go now and tell everybody, I met that guy from ESPN, and he is the biggest jerk in the world, and he'd be right. To say that, because that was his one experience. So my point is, this is one out of 9 million things Kevin Durant has said. Now, all of a sudden, he's not a good guy. That whole speech where he loved his mother and all that kind of stuff, that was all way worse. He's not entitled to one bad day out of anything because, oh, my goodness, he ripped the media. He ripped the media. In this society, the last thing on earth you can do is rip the media. Why? Because we in the media have the thinnest skin of any collection of people there is.
Yeah, listen, I do agree with that. I agree with that. There is another side of it, too, and Rich brings it up, and this is one of the first emails I opened. So it's okay for athletes to use the media when they want to push their product and make their money by pushing their ads and their sponsorships, but God forbid anything negative is written about them.
But that's all part of the game.
Yeah.
They get aggravated. I'm not saying that it's wrong or right. He does. Look, Kevin Durant, 99 out of 100 times has been ridiculously easy to deal with.
Oh, it's been fantastic. You
on
heard
this show and everywhere.
When I heard Chauncey Billups and Legs talk about this, they basically agreed, bad day, much like you in the elevator. You know, it happens every now and then, but it can even happen to someone who's not having a bad day. A guy signs 100 autographs with his family and then, finally wants to move on with his family, and that 101st guy doesn't get an autograph, and he's the one going around saying, so-and-so didn't sign something for me. So it can be dicey. But on the other side of it, I understand what Rich is saying. When athletes or actors want to use the media, it's like my trash magazines. They want it only sometimes they only want it when it's good for them, but God forbid you infringe on their privacy then. And then it's the old term. Wait a minute, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, of course. It's all part of a game. I mean, we all have our role to play in the game. They use us, we use them. As far as I'm concerned, this is the ultimate in no harm, no foul. And the part of it that I am just flabbergasted by is the way people are reacting as though, well, now Kevin Durant is a different human being than we ever thought he was. Obviously. We've read this guy completely wrong.
It was ridiculous.
He's been in the public eye now since he was a 17-year-old kid at Texas, or whatever it was he was, that 1 year that he played at Texas. And then he couldn't bench press 109 pounds, and no one thought he'd be any good. And now he's the MVP of the league and all the rest of that. But now he had a really bad day. He sounded off, and now he's just a terrible human being.
Yeah.
This is the way I watched people react to him yesterday, and it's ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. By the way, he did 185 3 times, I believe.
Whatever it was.
Could you do 185?
What, a bench press?
You bench press 185?
Actually, yes. 185 is what? How much is 2 plates?
2 plates is 2 1/4.
Yes.
Wait. 2 plates on each side?
245s on each
or
side.
just 245?
No,
245s on each side.
Yes.
225.
I did that once.
Did you really?
Yes, in college. That was my.
I was going to say.
Oh, not
week.
now. I haven't bench pressed in years.
Okay.
But no, that was my. That
was your max.
If you want to talk about my max, that was my max.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
For 10, 12 reps?
No, one rep. I got it off once.
Oh, well, okay.
I got it
so
off.
the 225 test coming up on the
normally
combine.
I would do back when I was benching, which is a very long time ago. I would bench with 1 plate on each side. I would do reps. Sets
with 135.
With 45. So
right,
135. Right.
Pounds,
Yes. Pounds. Right.
Okay. I was just wondering.
I wasn't a football player for crying out loud. I was just a college student working out.
I know a lot of people who are football players can bench 2 1/4 more than one.
And I'm not one of them. What's the point you're trying to make here, Mr. Media? You want me to go off on you? You know what? You don't know bleep. You know that? You don't know a darn thing. I'm just talking to you because I have to. I'm just here because they pay me to. 15 years I've been getting paid to sit next to you and talk about sports. I wouldn't be doing it otherwise.
Okay, now you hurt my feelings.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Yesterday, we did something we've never done before, and it was really fun. We had our wives up here after the show, and we recorded a special 15th anniversary podcast, the 4 of us. Mike and Chris Golick, Mike and Stacy Greenberg. It's up right now on the Mike and Mike page at ESPNradio.com. It's almost an hour long, so download it. Take some,
go
when
work
you have
out.
some time. Listen,
work out to it.
But it's fun. We told all kinds of stories about our lives, about the show, about whatever. Fun stuff, things I didn't even remember. Yeah. And again, they had to cut us off because we were in Ryan and Scott's studio, and we were otherwise they couldn't do a show. But there's really a lot of fun stuff in there. So if you want to check it out, and I assume it's on Twitter too, right? It's on the Mike and Mike page, on the Mike and Mike Twitter feed on Twitter. So at Mike and Mike on Twitter, it's out there if you want to hear it. It's really a lot of fun, and if you're a fan of the show, I think you will really enjoy it. All right, let's move on to a few other things. Doug Baldwin did something in the Super Bowl that really bothered me. Doug Baldwin, as you might recall, scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. It was his only catch of the Super Bowl. He had one catch for 3 yards and a touchdown, whatever. And in so doing, he burned Darrelle Revis on the play.
Darrelle Revis actually ran into the referee. It was a great using the ref on a rub play.
And you all remember what Doug Baldwin did. He
was sitting on the toilet.
Yeah,
that's what he did. Squatted down.
I couldn't decide if he was feigning defecating on the football or that he was defecating the football.
Yeah.
Neither way is necessarily better than the other way.
Either way, it was ridiculous.
And he was on the barbershop program, 710 ESPN in Seattle, explaining it. And he was explaining that was something that was between him and Darrelle Revis, because he was so focused on that matchup with Darrelle Revis, and then he went on to say the rest of this.
I get that. I get that, some people will be upset about the celebration. I think it's more so it's misplaced anger towards just the fact that we lost. And they want to find something to kind of latch on to. And that's, that's understandable. That's human nature. But, personally, I didn't mean anything by it negatively towards anybody. I do regret the fact that it, cost my team 15 yards. And to the fans, ultimately, I apologize to anybody who I offended in any way. It wasn't about that. Like I said, it was just a competitive situation. So, to all the 12s, all the fans, it's not what it's about. And so I apologize to anybody if I offended them.
So there's what he said.
Yeah, he went on to say in that moment it was just a reaction. So obviously, if I could take it back, I would take it back. So,
right. Is it the worst crime ever committed in the history of mankind? Obviously not. But here's what I'd say. I don't know who was offended by that. I mean, everyone knows what it is. It's not He didn't make a vulgar gesture. I think there are more offensive things. I remember for a brief period of time there, that throat slash gesture was popular in the National Football League. I think that was worse in its own way. To me, this was not something that I felt offended by. In my personal opinion, it was just beneath his dignity. I just think he made himself look like
like what he was doing.
Like what he was doing. He made himself look like a horse's behind. And that's the reality of it. So to apologize for offending people, okay, if people were offended, then I suppose that's fine.
I have no problem.
I don't have a problem with it either. But to me, that's not really addressing the point. To me, you live your whole life in anticipation of that moment.
Wow, I mean,
that's the way you chose to celebrate it.
I mean, I can only think of myself, and to think of him thinking about the regret has to be there. I mean, you scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl, and that's what you did. That will get played over and over and over again. And as you said, and I agree, it's not the biggest issue in the world. Listen, we talk about sports. Most of the things we talk about aren't the biggest issues in the world and aren't world-changing events, but they're the things we talk about. And with 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when you see replays of that game and you see him doing that, I think he's going to end up cringing, just cringing at the fact that this is what I chose to do when I scored what made, it is one touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, it's the unclassiest thing. That's the thing. It's not vulgar. It's not offensive. It's just stunningly unclassy. So as one who was extremely critical of it and will remain such, there was no need to apologize. I wasn't offended.
Well, no, I'm glad he did. I completely see why he did.
I think that, to me,
what the word
I think the word regret. Yeah, I guess you were apologizing.
I mean, he says if I go back, I would take it back. If I had a chance to do it again, I would take it back. I mean, it's one of those.
I guess it's something that you say, but maybe I'm just mincing or parsing the words here.
I'm fine.
But I guess
with
my point
apology.
is, this was less about being offensive than it was about just being classless.
Yeah.
If he had done something that you would have to explain to your children later, that not that you want your children doing that, obviously, in a game, but you know what? That's one that even the kids wouldn't emulate. Like, I worry sometimes that the kids, like the crotch grab thing for Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah, no, the kids
I worry the kids are going to emulate that because I can see that being positioned as cool.
Many kids in the youth league or high school pulling that one.
No, seriously. What are they going to do? I want to go to the bathroom on the ball.
Yeah.
Because I'm 5. Yeah. I mean, that's just, what can you say? So, anyway, Doug, that was, I mean, whatever. I wasn't offended, but I appreciate the thought.
Mike and Mike.
Very quickly before we get to Love It or Shove It, again, Bubba is here, and I'm trying to broker a wager between Bubba and Golick again. The Cowboys wager went so well. This one's much easier on Golick. Bubba's a crazy Met fan. If they make the playoffs, Golick sends them to a game at Citi Field. So there's no flight. There's no lodging. All you have to do is get them tickets. Not that complicated. And it won't be that expensive. And the question is, what does Bubba have to put up in return? I have a couple of pretty good ones here that I think are interesting. One of them, if Bubba loses, he has to go see the Cowboys play the Eagles in Philly wearing Eagles colors.
I don't know if I want to do that, too. I don't think it's as bad as it was at the vet when you did that. Up in that 700 level.
It'd be a safety issue there.
Yeah. I don't,
And not our problem. How about this?
I don't want Ted all of a sudden looking for a new owner.
Well, how about this one? Bubba, if he loses, has to serenade Golick with Luciano Pavarotti's hits. Because he looks just like Luciano Pavarotti.
I don't even want that.
Okay. But then the last one, and this came from a lot of different places. I'd love to credit whoever the first person was, but I've seen many of them. And so I'm going to give this one to Thomas Richards. 3 words. Bubba butt photo.
Oh, God.
The Bubba butt photo.
Wow.
Butt photo.
You know what? That makes me
now
think
we're
a little
talking
bit.
Steaks, baby.
Makes me think
now
a little bit.
Now we're talking steaks.
It makes me think a little bit until I got this from the wife.
Your wife?
Yes, my wife.
Okay.
In capital letters, no more betting with Bubba. And then, don't let Greeny rope you into making a bet. Tell him I will beat his butt if he keeps that up. And let me tell you, she did not use the word butt. She went with the 3-letter word that starts with an A and ends with an S.
I understand.
You know what I mean?
I am fully cognizant.
That's where she went. She will wear you out, my friend, if you keep talking me into this bet.
And yet I still think this is a good idea. Mm-hmm. We have until the beginning of the baseball season to work out the details. Meanwhile, let's do Love It or Shove It. That's why Bubba's here. It's brought to you by Dollar Shave Club. He's gone through some of the headlines of the sports day. He'll present them to us, and we will either love them or shove them. Bubba, go.
All right, Shannon Sharp saying he doesn't think Russell Wilson is a top 12 to 15 quarterback without Marshawn Lynch. Love it or shove it.
Well, let me play it. This was Shannon Sharp. Again, many of you maybe not in your normal routine yesterday. It was President's Day and everything else. This is what Shannon Sharp said on our show. We were asking him about Marshawn Lynch.
He is the table setter. He is the heartbeat of that. He is the heartbeat of that football team, not just the offense. Because if you look, when he starts running the football, look how Cam Chancellor, look how Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman run on the field and snap at him. You don't see that with any other offensive player like you see it with Marshawn Lynch. He is the guy. And when he look, and this is not to take anything away from Russell Wilson, he's going to make $100 million. But without him, Russell Wilson's a different quarterback. I don't think he's without Marshawn Lynch at this current juncture. I wouldn't have Russell in my top 12, top 15 quarterback.
So I look at the top-rated quarterbacks, Greeny. Would you put Russell Wilson ahead of any of these quarterbacks that you want on your team? Here's the top 7: Romo, Aaron, Ben, Peyton, Brady, Drew Brees, Andrew Luck.
It depends. I don't mean to cop out on the question, but it depends. You know, on a variety of things. I mean, Russell Wilson's at the very beginning of his career. Right. He's played 3 years. He has been in the Super Bowl twice, won it once, and has won. I think he's won more games. Isn't that the stat? He's won more games than any quarterback in history through his first 3 years.
I guess my point more is you could legitimately have an argument where you would take those quarterbacks, correct? You could have a little bit of
the elitist of the elite in the game.
I'm looking at some of the other big name quarterbacks that weren't rated up that high. A Matt Ryan, a Phillip Rivers, a Matt Stafford. You know,
right now, if Atlanta offered Seattle a straight-up trade, Matt Ryan for Russell Wilson, or if that trade was on the table, which side wouldn't do it? Maybe both sides wouldn't do it.
Well, I don't think Atlanta would do it because, see, the difference is the style. I mean, that's where you're going.
Right, you've built your team around that part of it. I get it. But you know what I mean. In a vacuum, would you trade? Would the Ravens trade Joe Flacco for him? Would the Tampa Bay Buccaneers trade the first pick in the draft for him?
I think they would. I think they would do that because now you're getting a guy that's not proven at all. Joe Flacco is we've seen what he's done, especially in the playoffs. He's a money guy. I shoved this question.
I shove it, too. I'm a Russell Wilson believer.
I shove it.
And I also think he's going to get better. That's the one thing about Russell Wilson is that he does what he does extraordinarily effectively. And the things he doesn't do, A, he doesn't have the receivers to do it, and B, he hasn't ever been asked to do it. But I think he's got the intelligence and the work ethic to learn to do it. So I think he will become an improved pocket passer as time goes on. So I would say overall I shove it. I'm a big Russell Wilson fan.
Agreed.
Bubba, next.
All right, this one surprised me a little bit. The Yankees retiring the numbers of Pettit, Posada, and Williams. Love it or shove it?
You know, once they
Williams,
do that,
of course, is Bernie for the
Bernie Williams. Once they do that, they're going to have 22 numbers retired. And get this, you know Jeter's number 2 is getting retired. Once they retire that, the first eligible number you could wear for a Yankee is number 11. 1 through 10 after Jeter's is retired will be retired. I don't know, Greeny. Does it seem to be? I know they've had great. Listen, don't get me wrong. I understand they've had great players, but I mean, wow.
They're eventually going to have to go to letters.
It's a lot of numbers retired.
It is. Here's what I'd say. Those are all terrific players.
Yeah.
Pettit, Posada, and Bernie Williams, all terrific players. I don't think you need to retire their numbers, in my opinion.
Well, really, like a guy like Willie Randolph is getting a plaque in Monument Park. Okay. So, I mean, you could do that, right?
Yeah, like I think Tino Martinez and Paul O'Neill got plaques.
Right.
So give a plaque to these guys.
So you can get a plaque and get your number retired, you know.
It reminds me of Seinfeld when he's like Ruth, Gehrig, Mantle, DiMaggio, Pettit.
Yeah.
I don't think you can those go together.
I think it's a bit much. I really do.
I'll throw one other thing in there. Did you see what Chuck Knobloch tweeted?
No.
Knobloch tweeted a shot at Pettit. It's not on my hot list anymore, but I'll paraphrase it.
I'm sure I have a feeling where
what he
it's going to go.
basically tweeted was, "I see that they're retiring Andy Pettit's number. I wonder if they're retiring his HGH use or something like that." Get me the tweet. It was in the hot list. I guess it got knocked out of the last hot list. I want to read it exactly what it said. Knobloch, there it is. Congrats to 46. Yankees retiring his number. Hopefully they don't retire it like his HGH testimony.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we brought this up again. He admitted he used it, I guess a couple of times. He, had the I'm sorry thing. And as we've always said, listen, this is a very forgiving sports society, and he's a very likable person, without a question. So you pick and choose. Do you either say, is Andy Pettit, when he comes up a vote for the Hall of Fame, is he summarily dismissed? Like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. If he is not, then I'm sorry. If you're a writer that votes for him and say I'm not putting in PED guys, you're a hypocrite. You just flat out are. You can't tell me otherwise. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
You can't. If you say, well, he only did it a couple of times and he admitted to it, so I'm voting for him, and you're not saying the other guys because they use PEDs, you are a hypocrite. So I got nothing for you if you're going to go down that road because he's a nice guy. I get all that. I do. I understand all that. But according to the writers that vote, they're not putting in any PED users. He was a PED user. Now, I'm not saying that completely negative because you and I both would put guys deserving of being in the Hall, PEDs or not, in the Hall.
The other issue that he has, which is separate from the discussion you're having, is that he's a borderline Hall of Famer anyway.
Right. Exactly.
He isn't Roger Clemens. He isn't Barry Bonds.
He would have been a lock. Right.
If there were no HGH, there'd be a debate about his Hall of Fame. The best thing he has going for him as a Hall of Famer is his postseason performance.
Exactly.
He's one of the great clutch pitchers of all time. He won more games in the middle of series that the Yankees needed desperately
Could not
to
agree
win
more
than anybody.
And that could be the tipping point because you're always looking for guys to be at their best in the biggest moments.
See, Schilling is another one like that. Schilling is another guy who, to me, now he doesn't have the HGH part of it, but Schilling is another one to me whose overall numbers may not look like Hall of Fame, but his postseason numbers. Schilling might be the best. And his numbers in the postseason as good as anybody ever.
So it'll come down to, is that enough to tip a guy in because of
He's
that?
going to get in eventually. Schilling, I think, will get in.
I think
Pettit will not. Pettit will not get in as long as the others. I can't. For exactly the reason you just said.
Can't do it.
How in the world would you put Andy Pettit in if you're not going to put Roger Clemens in? It is impossible to put Andy Pettit in if you didn't put Roger Clemens. Let's put it this way. Roger Clemens has to go into the Hall of Fame before Andy Pettit.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's not even debatable.
Could not agree more. And again, you and I, we would be putting them all in if they're like the Roger Clemens.
Well, I would either be putting them both in or neither of them in.
Right.
There's no way in the world I could put Pettit in and not Clemens in.
Completely agree.
I actually think I would put Clemens in and not... I'd have to sit down and look more closely at Pettit's numbers.
Yeah, I was looking up briefly earlier. He was only a 3-time All-Star.
Right, right.
And none of these guys won any major award.
I guess
MVP, Cy Young,
back
or
to
anything.
the question, I think I have to shove it. I mean,
what was the original question?
The Yankees retiring those numbers. Again, they're going to have 22 numbers retired. Once Jeter's is retired, you can't even get wear a number until you get to 11. I mean, it gets to be a little much. I know they've had a great history. Don't get me wrong.
Give them a plaque.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are other options. I don't want to begrudge anybody.
For the Yankee fan, they're all because of the championships. They won them, 5 titles.
Right.
So I think that's the main thing what this is about for them. It's because I think on paper, you look at the numbers. I don't think you can make an argument for any of them.
Bernie won 4, Posada won 4, Pettit won 5. Is that
championships?
Yeah. So I don't want to begrudge anybody a great ceremony of getting their jersey retired, but it seems to be a bit much.
It seems like some guys are plaque worthy,
yeah,
and others in other cases. I'm more interested in the Knobloch part of the Pettit thing. Now, as far as the possibility of a Bubba wager, at the risk of the wrath of Chris Goling, and I fear your wife.
I know you do.
She's a little scary.
You should fear her,
but. It is Ray she should be mad at, in this case, not me. Ray Netchie, who is our producer, who is not here today, but he's obviously listening. And you said a moment ago, when I'm trying to broker a wager, or you'd have to send Bubba to a Mets playoff game if the Mets make the playoffs. And what did Chris say?
She said she will beat your butt.
Right. If you make another bet.
Do this wager.
Ray says, and this is fair, it is worth noting that even though Chris said she'd beat your butt, we were only in the Golick butt photo situation because of her.
It's true.
I imagine a Bubba butt photo would just be him mooning someone. So the point is, she may be upset about it, but the Cowboys wager, I talked them into.
Yes.
You guys into. But the butt wager.
That was all her.
That was all Chris.
That was in South Bend. Yes.
So I think that her anger is misplaced. Maybe her venom is being spewed in the wrong direction.
You've been in a lot of therapy, so maybe you know this. Maybe is she really directing the anger at you, but it should be still at herself?
Yes, she's projecting herself, her anger at herself and my direction.
You. Okay, I can see that. That does.
But don't tell her I said that. Whatever you do, tell her Ray said it.
Hey, Chris. Greeny didn't say that.
Tell her someone else said it, just in case I see her again soon. Okay, Mike and Mike, let's finish up. We have a few more loves or shoves with Bubba, and then we'll get Bomani Jones in here. Go ahead, Bubba, next headline.
All right, Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota working out together before the NFL draft. Love it or shove it?
I love it. I have no problem with it at all. They're working out with the same trainer. They have different quarterback coaches. Yeah. George Whitfield for Winston and Kevin O'Connell for Mariota, O'Connell is going to be the quarterback coach for the Cleveland Browns once he's done with Marcus. So they have different guys there, but they're training together. I have no problem with it at all. Mel Kiper says neither one should throw at the combine, and I agree. You know, you're in a position when you're going to be possibly 1 and 2, you can control the situation a little more. And these guys should wait for their pro day. When they know the guys they're throwing to and they've worked with those guys, you're throwing to wide receivers and tight ends at the combine you haven't worked with before. So even though GMs and coaches are looking not necessarily that you made the completion, but that you were making the right throw to the right spot, but they still want a completion. So they want to set it up the best they can. So I agree they would wait till their pro day, but I have no problem with them working out together.
I got to be honest with you. I neither love it nor shove it. I couldn't be less interested in who they're working out with, how they're working out, or whether they throw at the combine or not. Personally, I've always felt this should he throw at the combine question to be the least interesting thing in sports. I've seen both of them throw a million passes. They're both going to have individual workouts with any team that might consider taking them. I find whether they throw at the combine or not completely irrelevant. Bubba, next question.
Real quick, should Ray be, Chris just tweeted or text, Ray just made the list.
Uh-oh. Ray, you're on the list.
Ray, that's not good.
That's a scary list.
Go ahead, Bubba.
You know what? The last 4 people on the list, we haven't heard from them in a while.
No, we have not.
No one knows where they are.
Nope.
Bubba, next.
All right, a lot of people have been suggesting this. Peyton Manning should take a pay cut in Denver. Love it or shove it?
That's a really interesting question. If you're Peyton Manning, and let's face it, you're loading up for 1 more year.
Right.
Is it possible he plays 2 more years? Sure it is. But he clearly is on a year-to-year basis right now. Now, Peyton loves his money, and there's no reason he shouldn't. I am in no way being critical of him making a lot of money because he does a million commercials and all that. You know what? I love money too. I would love to have all of Peyton Manning's money. And if I were him, I'd do exactly what he does. I'd cut that meat. I'd chicken parm. You taste so good. I'd do everything he does. So I have no problem with that. But he's got all the money in the world.
Right.
So if you got 1 shot left at this thing, would you redo your contract so that it becomes insanely cap-friendly so your team can go out and load you up? Would you?
Do you think he should? I'd be stunned. You sit there and tell Kobe Bryant it's fine to take all the money you want. Don't even tell me that you should think Peyton should take a pay cut.
I'm asking if I were him, I would. I can't tell him he should, but I think if I were him, I might. Because I think, look, at the end of the day, he's in it exclusively at this point to win. That's his best chance to win, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, isn't it that? So if you were him, don't you think you'd do it?
Well,
how much does he have to be worth? He's got to be worth $500 million.
But you know how that works. Just because someone has a lot of money doesn't mean.
Well, I don't begrudge him a penny. Not a penny. He has earned every dime he's made. He has worked as hard as you can work. He has played as well as you can play. I begrudge him not 1 cent that he has made. But if I were in his shoes, I might seriously consider doing that, because if I'm going to try and load up and win one championship, I might consider it. I really would.
I put it this way. I'd have the conversation with John Elway, with management there to see what are you looking to get, what do you need money for. I don't know what their cap situation is now, where they are with signing guys, but it would be worth a conversation. I'm not saying I would do it, but I'm saying you could have the conversation.
Love it or shove it with Bubba. We got one headline left. Bubba, go.
The Vikings saying the team would welcome back Adrian Peterson. Love it or shove it.
Here's my thought on all of this. Even though we've seen the horrific things of domestic violence, and in this case, you know, it had to do with Adrian Peterson's child, whatever you had thought of that. But I'll take any transgression out there. That if there's a punishment, and the league certainly has gone through their issues with punishment, but we have punishment, whatever the punishment is for your company, for the NFL, for baseball, for, you know, Apple, for their employees, whatever that punishment is for that transgression, you serve it according to that company. Listen, then so be it. If that team wants to sign you back, fine. It's the teams that get themselves in trouble putting themselves in a box of, we don't want them back anymore, and then it works out to where they can come back, and now do you want them back after you said that? In general, for me, you do your time after doing the crime to that, whatever that company is, that you should have every opportunity in the world if somebody wants to sign you back. That you should have a chance. And now if nobody wants to sign you, so be it. Now, I have no problem with that either. If all the teams say, you know what, I don't mean the collusion thing, but I mean, we don't want him here. We don't want him here. We don't want him here. I'm fine with that as well. But if somebody wants to sign him after he served his time, I have no problem with that.
I agree. I don't know if it'll wind up being in Minnesota. I did hear people, you know, he's always wanted to play for the Cowboys.
Yes.
Remember there was that story about his conversation with Jerry. They owe a bunch, you know, do they want to redo DeMarco Murray's deal, give him huge money?
Dez is the more important of the two.
So do you try and get Peterson?
Yeah.
Now, he's not cheap. So I don't know the one way where that works or the other. But that's going to be an interesting one. All things considered, I love it as well. Bubba, well done.
Thanks, Bubba.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Those of you who watch Highly Questionable afternoons on ESPN2 or listen to Dan Lebitard's radio show here on ESPN Radio are certainly familiar with our next guest. With us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline is Bomani Jones. Bomani, Mike and Mike, how are you this morning?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
We're great, and I enjoy your work very much, and one of the things I enjoy is that frequently you will take a position that makes me think about things in a slightly different way. So I'm certainly, my mind is open to you changing it if you have a different position. But you just heard my take on the Kevin Durant thing. Again, as someone who came into this business a generation after I did, I'd be really curious to hear your perspective on not just on what Kevin Durant said, but also on the reaction to it.
Well, I think the interesting difference is not just I came in a generation after, but I came in this business in a way that's kind of specific to this generation. Like, I didn't go to journalism school. I kind of had a regular life before I got into this. So I'm not like a dyed-in-the-wool media guy. I kind of can see this from both sides. And I think the part the media guys always forget is nobody's coming to your job asking you a bunch of questions while you're naked out the shower, right? Asking you about your boss, asking you about your friends, asking you about all of these things. If you had to do that at work every day, I'd imagine that could be very frustrating. Like, we can say that this is just a part of the job, but it's not something that anybody would want to do. And when something happens that makes a media member become the person that has to answer the questions, you'd be amazed at how quickly the tables turn on that one. Like, I feel kind of like both sides on this one don't have a proper respect for the humanity of the other. Like, on one hand, yes, you are forced to stand in front of your locker in a towel and answer all these guys asking questions that some of them might be stupid. On the other hand, nobody necessarily wants to have to be the person to ask those questions and be in a position to be humiliated if an athlete doesn't feel like talking to you or anything else. So I feel like both sides wind up screaming at the other, and nobody's really listening because both of them, to a degree, are in an uncomfortable situation.
So is there an answer? Is there a better way? Is there a way to tweak it, or are we just living with the way it is?
Well, I think the best thing that writers could do or media in general could do, and this certainly isn't everybody, but you got to have a certain level of confidence about this. So if Kevin Durant said he doesn't feel like talking to you, I don't understand getting your feelings hurt about it. He's got to talk to you, so go from there because he said he'll do it. You can't be so bothered by this idea that somebody doesn't want to talk to you or the idea that him not wanting to talk to you is delegitimizing your existence. And I do feel like a lot of guys, when people say that they don't want to talk to them, oh, you don't care if I have to do my job, and then it all goes downhill from there.
Mike and Bomani Jones, there's another side to this as well, and that is that maybe not specifically Kevin Durant, but the major professional athlete today has a variety of ways of expressing his views and getting his message out to those who his fans that do not involve the conduits of the media that used to be. One of them obviously is social media, Twitter, etc. There's now this Players Tribune. I was reading the piece that Andrew McCutcheon did on the Players Tribune website that Derek Jeter started. It's fascinating that he's basically doing by himself. So, I mean, I feel there's also a little bit of territorial protection that may be going on here, Bomani, because I feel that some people might be starting to feel as though our place in this game is becoming a little bit less necessary.
Well, we certainly are a bit less necessary. There'll always be a place for media, though, because nobody's just going to trust what people tell them without some level of scrutiny, right? Like, you're not just going to have a world where everybody just gets to say what they want unchallenged. People do, to a degree, want there to be a level of challenge. But you mentioned a great point with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant doesn't need us anymore. Like, when he was younger in his career, you can make an argument that he did need us, and he was very available. He went out of his way to do things. But after a certain point, I do think he looked up and he realized that this hustle isn't necessarily going to work out for me. And now he's frustrated. I think he's also probably frustrated kind of with the general state of the season and everything else. But no, a lot of guys don't need us, but for a while, a lot of guys haven't needed us. Like when you think about in 95, when Jordan decided he was never going to speak to Sports Illustrated again, when Sports Illustrated was Sports Illustrated. He didn't need them, but they needed him so bad they're still putting him on the cover. Like, I do agree, that dynamic of who needs whom does make this interesting, because I think a lot of media guys look at players and are like, hey, you need us. And they're looking at them like, I drive a Maserati. I don't really need you, per se.
Mike and Bomani Jones, right. So that's one of the ways in which this whole thing has changed. And then there's also just the reality of having a bad day. I told the story earlier this morning, and I mean, I'm not proud of this. Again, I probably get recognized 1%, less than that, 0.1% as often as Kevin Durant does, because he's much more famous than I am, and he's 7 feet tall. But, I mean, a guy and recognized me in an elevator on a day that I was having a very bad day. I'm not worth getting into the details. And I was not especially polite to him. And the second he got out of the elevator, I regretted it. Less from a human level, I probably should have regretted it more from a human level, but more because I thought to myself, that guy is now going to go tell everyone he knows, yeah, I met that guy who's on in the mornings on ESPN, and what a jerk that guy is. You're not going to believe it. And there'll be a whole bunch of small group, whatever group of it is, you know, they'll tell two friends and they'll tell two friends, who will then think that I am someone other than who I am. So I think there is the whole sort of having a bad day side to this that we sometimes don't allow a guy like Kevin Durant to have.
Well, he also might be tired of us. Like, let's not forget that part. It is also entirely possible he's tired of us. Because think about this. How long has Kevin Durant been playing this game with media now? Since he was, 16 years old?
Yeah.
And I bet when he was 16 years old, it was really cool. And I think for a lot of guys that if you first get to the league and nobody's really talked to you before, I bet it's really cool. You got all these guys around you and they want to know what you think, and you're in the process of becoming a star. But there's a dynamic at play also that once you give those words to a writer, you're absolutely at that writer's mercy. Like once you give this clip to television cameras, you're absolutely at their mercy, and they can turn it into we can turn things into whatever we want. Most of us have an ethical grounding that'll stop us from doing that. But like the day that Kevin Durant looked up and saw that he was Mr. Unreliable, yeah, that's part of the game. But at the same time, I bet he thinks to himself, I've helped you guys X, Y, Z times, and now you're going to wind up selling me out. I do think that's a really uncomfortable position to be in, especially when we look at Durant. I guess he's 26 years old now? Like, there's so much that goes on here, and I do hate that media members are so thin-skinned about this, because it's all of a sudden, you don't respect what I do for a living? And I'm not sure how many media members actually respect what the athletes do for a living. Like, the disconnect seems so much to be about the human beings in place.
Mike and Mike, Bomani Jones is with us again. You know him from Highly Questionable. You hear him with Dan Lebitard here on ESPN Radio frequently. He's on our Subway Fresh Steak Hotline at Subway. Experience the breakthrough taste of new grilled chicken strips. Subway, eat fresh. Bomani, while we have you, let's go around the world of sports. A couple of other topics here. We haven't even gotten to this today, Mike, but Kobe Bryant did an interview. It's called Kobe the Interview on NBA TV, in which he says, I can't say this is the end. I thought the Spurs were done 20 years ago. Those guys are still winning. So to answer the question, I can't say this is the end of my era because I thought their era was done and they're still here. So I'm hoping I can have the same rebirth. Bomani, do you see any chance in the world that there is anything that anyone might describe as a rebirth left out there in Los Angeles for Kobe?
Oh, God, no. I mean, this is the third straight season that has ended with a season-ending injury. The third straight. Like, this doesn't stop after a while. And it happens all the time with old guys. They'll come back around after a certain point and be like, yeah, I feel better than I ever have before, and then it breaks down again. And I don't begrudge him this because I imagine it's a difficult transition to make. But if he actually believes that, you know, this is going to turn into something because Tim Duncan got better, man, he needs to go check the MRIs and everything else. It just seems that after all these years, he's got too many miles on the odometer. I don't blame him for wanting to play. Like, you can't blame him for wanting to continue what he's done for so long. But a rebirth, nah, bro. nah.
And on that, between the Lakers with Kobe hoping for a rebirth and the Knicks with Carmelo there, at least for the foreseeable future. Do you see in the next 2 off seasons any big-time free agents going to either of those teams?
I think the Lakers will always have a chance to get free agents because they will always be the Lakers and they will always be in Los Angeles. Like, never forget, Sasha Vujacic married Maria Sharapova while he was playing for the Lakers. While he was riding the oak. Like, playing for the Lakers is really, really cool. The Knicks, on the other hand, haven't signed a free agent of true significance in my life. Like, we keep saying the Knicks are going to get the free agent. The Knicks are going to get the free agent. Maybe something happened salary cap-wise and they managed to pull that off, but that's never happened. I lived a life where the Lakers are always able to go get the player that they need to get. It's hard for me to believe that they won't be able to get at least one.
Mike and Mike, Bomani Jones is with us. This is fun, so let me throw one more at you. We talked about Alex Rodriguez this morning, and things have now gotten to be so ridiculously bad between A-Rod and the Yankees that the latest dispute seems to be where he's going to hold his press conference that he obviously has to have. He's coming back from a year-long suspension in which the ultimate scorched earth policy, he sued everybody. He's now going around, he's making the amends tour. He went to Rob Manfred. He's gone to the Yankees offices for whatever. Now he's got to sit down and sort of explain to the world himself at least one time. And the Yankees are unwilling, according to our Wally Matthews, are unwilling to allow him to do so in Tampa, where they have their spring training, because they feel that will be a distraction. They've offered him Yankee Stadium. He and his people have turned that down. It is my thought, Bomani, that if things have gotten this bad, I mean, if the Yankees just hate this guy this much, and if the bridges that he burned, understandably, are so beyond repair they can't deal with it, that even at $60 million, I think they just got to write him a check and have him go away, because having him there becomes a bigger problem than it's worth. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. And this has been a catastrophe since he forced his way back, I guess, a year and a half ago, where they needed him because the third basemen were so bad that even the corpse of Alex Rodriguez was going to be better than the guy they happen to have. I personally hope they don't do anything like you described, because as someone who grew up with a Braves fan, and still can't stand Jim Leyritz, I'm rooting for full-on chaos on this one. And I'm rooting for full chaos on this one in part because there's a level of hypocrisy. You're about to retire Andy Pettitt's number, and you don't want Alex Rodriguez to be anywhere near. You had that press conference in Tampa years ago where Rodriguez was obviously lying about the performance enhancing drugs, and you rode along with it just to push it as far as it would go. Now you just feel like it's too bad, so you want Alex to go away? No, Alex, come around, make noise, make a stink. Let's do this all year long. Let's have a big celebration when you pass Willie Mays. I want all of this to wind up happening. I felt like that a little bit before, but then when I realized that we're still going to ride out with Andy Pettit's Andy Griffith routine about, well, I was just hurt, I just needed to take some drugs to get back. If they're going to ride that out, then you got to ride Alex Rodriguez out. You can't really have that both ways.
It's Bomani Jones again. You see him every afternoon with Highly Questionable. Really enjoyed this. Bomani, give a little insight, because I'm fascinated by the show, and we know Dan Le Batard a little bit. We've never had Poppy on. Give us a sense, just give us a little behind the scenes on Poppy. For those who don't know the show, it's Dan's father, and he's just hilarious. Just give us a little insight into the man behind the legend that is Poppy Le Batard.
Well, the interesting thing for me is I get to see him, actually around his son without, being on a television, right? The coolest thing with Poppy is coming into work and, seeing him bring in Dan's car registration because it's still sent out to the house that Poppy happens to stay in, right? And those are, the most endearing sorts of moments. Or just coming in complaining about the Heat and what Chris Bosh did wrong last night. It just winds up being these roles, and he goes and he goes and he goes. And we just all sit there and laugh, and he'll probably go on the same role the next day. But it never gets old, you know what I mean? It always rocks.
This has been the best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNradio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The best of Mike and Mike.